She said, my question is, how do you maintain your spiritual practice while having any sort of social life? I always find that when I go through major introvert phases, I make wonderful progress, but when I have to socialize, I feel like I've drained some of my energy. I can't seem to find a balance. Even taking the train makes me feel exhausted, or walking into crowded malls, etc. I'm looking forward to your answer. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask. Have a great weekend. Okay, it's a good question. The answer is so simple, just like every Toltec answer. It's so simple. Let's go to the Bible, and let's go to a quote in the Bible in Matthew 7:14. And it says, the narrow gate. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the way that leads to life, and only a few find it. Beware of false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. Enter through the narrow gate. Small is the gate and narrow the way that leads to life, and only a few find it. That's the one right there. Only a few find it. You mentioned spiritual practice. That's a big, big term. Big, big word. It's kind of like God. 8 billion people or whatever on this plane now, and this portion of the plane quarantined away, 8 billion of us, or 7 or whatever it is, they'll all hear the word God and hear it 8 billion different ways. And the same with spiritual practice. 8 billion people will hear that word 8 billion different ways. So what you mean by spiritual practice is not what I, as a Toltec warrior, understand as spiritual practice. I guarantee you this. I'll tell you exactly when I'll prove it right now. So that quote, keep that quote in mind. Spiritual practice usually is meditation. For some people, jogging can be a spiritual practice. Guided meditations, sitting in silence, doing this, doing that, sitting with the Dalai Lama or with your guru or whatever is your spiritual practice, right? Or candle gazing or yoga. For the Toltec warrior, none of these are spiritual practices. That's the only problem. These are the spiritual practices of the average man's consensus insanity. And they contribute very generously to the insanity, the collective insanity, all these spiritual practices, Scientology. For the warrior, there's only one spiritual practice, really, if you want to label that as such. It is a way of being, but for the warrior, it's the only valid spiritual practice. And when I tell you this spiritual practice, you will realize that the warrior is first and foremost concerned with efficiency of energy. Because for the Toltec warrior, energy in this world is his most or her most precious resource. Energy is not unlimited. Your body cannot process unlimited energy. Can't do it. Not whilst you're corporeal, and even whilst you're inorganic, you cannot process unlimited energy. It's not possible for anything in existence. It is possible for existence, because then now we're talking very macro, but not for the components that make up existence. So given that energy is so precious for the warrior, everything we do is geared towards efficiency of lines of energy, lines of force. Our power and force is very precious to us, and we do not waste it willy-nilly in indulging in all sorts of different things. So if even traveling is draining me, introvert phases, and I'm making great progress in my spiritual practice, for the Toltec warrior, already those are big alarm bells. Big alarm bells. Okay, it's too complicated. and it's too inefficient. For the Toltec warrior, that's the wide road that many take and no one succeeds. Many have tried, everyone fails. What does the Toltec warrior do? Remember, I've told you, flip it all around. Flip it around and you get the answer. The warrior practices instead letting things be as they are. Inside and outside. First, you've got to get that basis sorted. Your basic of instinctively just let things be as they are, especially inside yourself. It is easy to say. I promise you, it is one of the hardest things you will ever practice. That is exactly why it's the narrow road and few ever find it. Now, if you practice letting things be as they are, do you think that you will need to maintain your spiritual practice in any way? All you're doing is letting things be as they are. There is no spiritual practice that you are indulging in. You're simply letting things be as they are inside yourself. A spiritual practice assumes lack, brokenness. I need to be fixed. And this spiritual practice will fix it, whatever the spiritual practice is. But if you're practicing letting things be as they are, this moment as it is, then you don't need to maintain anything. While having some sort of social life, you can let your social life be as it is. There's no need to change it. Let things be as they are. I always find that when I go through major introvert phases, let the major introvert phase be as it is. Here's the alarm bells. I make wonderful progress. In what? What are you progressing in? I would love to know. I would love to know. I've met Buddhist monks, 40 years Zen, staring at walls, clanging their big bells, and what do they do? They have these big horns that they're sitting with their red silly robes and blaring out these horns, and the incense is boom. You know, I've met people who have done this all their life. They started as children and they have got nowhere in life. Nowhere in life. In the end, realizing that all of that was to just get them to stop interfering in their life flow. Right? I make wonderful progress. Where? What? Who is gaining by this wonderful progress within you? That's the question you got to ask. Right? The real you that is this moment cannot make any progress or not make progress. It simply is. That is why you learn to let things be. But when I have to socialize, I feel like I've drained some of my energy. Again, see, when you're socializing, let things be. Allow yourself to socialize. Let it be as it is. I can't seem to find a balance, you see, because you're out of balance. You're trying for something that is, it's like a fish looking for water. Why? Why would you look for water? You're a fish. I can't seem to find a balance. These are the complaints of a fish looking for water. Even taking the train makes me feel exhausted, or walking into crowded malls. Yes, I totally hear you. It will exhaust you because you're trying to hoard something, a spiritual practice that needs to be maintained and cultivated, and there's all this story with it that comes with it. Of course, it's going to make you feel exhausted. Of course. But if you practice the opposite, flip all that around, stop trying to control your inner flow through spiritual practice. Stop trying to make it progress. I don't know. Every progress I found, these spiritual people, when people say, oh, I've progressed a lot in my spiritual practice, I found that they have an idea in their head given to them by someone else. It didn't come from them either from a holy book These are the most unholy books you'll ever find, by the way. Or some priest has come along, given them this idea, or worst of all, these fucking gurus have come along, given you ideas. Or you've been watching too much YouTube. You might have been watching my videos and got ideas. Right? And people create fantasies in their head, a nice Disney movie of what they should look like when they have gained their spiritual perfection through the spiritual practice. And then they set about really just manifesting this fantasy in their head. Oh, yes, I'm making wonderful progress today. Yes. And it's like, whoa, man, breathe, just whoa. Where do you think you're going? Where do you think you're going? But I have no idea where I'm going. I'm just chasing a phantom in my head. So I get you. In the world you're in, those things will be like what you reported. I myself have experienced them, until I realized that, oh, the idea is to practice letting things be just as they are. No interference. Move from there first. Then if you need to change something, it will arise out of wisdom and not chasing fantasies. But it's a deep question. It's a real struggle for the spiritual people of the average man's consensus insanity, who mean very well, have beautiful hearts, mean very well, but walking down the wide way. The narrow way is this one, and very few find it. Remember this one.